Hi. It's not difficult to notice that today I'm not coming in hot with some aesthetic wannabe shots of whatever I'm doing. Instead, I'm sitting here in front of the camera confronting the worst fear of actually talking about my life. I started this channel in the heights of the pandemic because I want to create memories to look back on when I eventually finish off this PhD chapter of my life and am further off in the future. And while I am grateful for this opportunity to create content and for each and every one of my little audience right here, I started losing my why. I started paying too much attention to numbers and why this person's sub count is growing faster than mine. Stupid things like that. So first of all, I'm putting a full stop on that. And second of all, I want to actually start creating more things that I would actually reminisce and find meaning in myself, which leads to this video. This is going to be my first, or if you count the grad school loneliness video, my second video essay. Except this time around, I'm actually gonna be talking straight at a camera. Okay, so today I have a declaration or confession, I would say, to make. I have too much on my plate. Well, let me fill in some historical gaps that I was previously too intimidated to share. As you know, my name is Lishu. I am a fourth-year PhD student, now PhD candidate at a research institution in Wisconsin, United States. But what you don't know is that I work freelance in the translation industry, working Chinese, English, translation, copy editing, and review work. This is eventually how I was able to pay off my car in full and still had some savings left. I'm also starting a Master of Science in Law program at Northwestern University in Chicago this fall. Studying law has been a dream of mine for years, and being able to do it at a top-tier law school is just, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me. Other than that, I'm also trying to get fluent in German. I picked up German in college when my alma mater at the time refused to recognize that I was in college speaking second language full-time and still forced me to take a second language class to fulfill my second language requirement for graduation. Sorry, too much information. But I did fall in love with the German language and would love to be able to speak it fluently. So before I found out that I was accepted to the law program, I signed up for a language sprint on Lingoda, which demands about 3 classes per week for 6 months starting in August. While all of this is and will be going on, I am also trying to keep up with my actual PhD work, my half marathon training, strength training, physique goals, eating healthy, trying to push manuscripts out, trying to maintain an adequate social life, and trying to maintain my mental health. Admitting that I have too much on my plate is more difficult than you think. When you're at a job interview, if the interviewer asks you, what's one of your weaknesses, you're never supposed to say, I just work too hard. It can come off as a half-assed attempt of saying something bad about yourself that still sounds positive. It's devoid of self-reflection, which is kind of the point of that question. While that answer is not exactly interview appropriate, I do think it has a point. I can't articulate it well just yet, but I'm gonna try to talk it out for myself, and hopefully you can take something from this too. So grab a drink of your fancy, grab some snacks, and hear me out. I think my biggest issue with working too hard can stem from not having a healthy boundary for myself. When my boyfriend and I first started dating, he sent me this book called Boundaries: When to Say Yes, How to Say No to Take Control of Your Life by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Believe it or not, this is a heavily Christian book. Neither of us is Christian. I was raised secular and have not identified with any religion. But I still found this book incredibly helpful in identifying what I was and still am somewhat lacking, which is a healthy emotional boundary between myself and the work I want to achieve. At this current stage of my life, with the amount of experiments I need to do to be able to craft a dissertation, my experimental timeline is a total blur. The cells and the animals don't wait for you to be ready. When they're ready, be on a Saturday or 4th of July, you either do something about them or you let them lapse or die. In a way, I am voluntarily letting work trample all over my life because I thought it is what I had to do to be able to get that PhD on time and that I am successful in the long run. While I am a person and this work belongs to me, in reality, the work controls me and my boundaries are lost. I have been reacting to the calling of my work by pushing everything else aside, when in reality what I should have done is to come up with options and choices and make the best decision for myself instead of letting the work choose for me. The difference between reacting and responding is choice. When you're reacting, they are in control. When you're responding, you are. So I think this is the first step to being able to, I just saw a butterfly. And this, I believe, is the first step to being able to set healthy boundaries for yourself. When you see where your field begins and ends, you're free to do with your field what you like because you know what you are to take responsibility for and what you are to own. Anything outside of that is almost always negotiable. Another issue I found with myself putting too much on my agenda is that I confuse motivation and validation. These ideas actually came to me when I was talking to a therapist. I've been seeking help lately, and this therapist that I had a trial call with was a tremendous listener and observer of human emotions. He has a doctorate himself, and he actually gave me some really precious nuggets of logic that I didn't realize that made so much sense in my life. So whenever I am overwhelmed with obstacles at work, a thing I tend to do is that I clam up and I become involuntarily lethargic. Like it would be difficult for me to get out of bed. Sometimes I wouldn't even have the mental capacity to leave the bed because I feel like all my liveliness has been drained from me and nothing I do in this whole wide world is gonna help me get over those obstacles at work, and my career, my life, they're just gonna suck. In the inevitable event that I do have to move because my experiments won't do themselves and I still have to be a functioning adult, I drag myself through the day and I dread the next day because I don't know if it's gonna be another day where I feel like everything is crushing down or if I actually will feel normal for once. On the days I happen to not feel depressed, though, I am overcome by this anxiety of what ifs in my career. What if I hadn't gone for my PhD? What would have happened in these 3 years? What if I quit? Would I still be successful in the long run? Is this the best choice that I've made for myself? Is there any other career that is the best for me that I have not discovered? And whenever those thoughts start flooding my brain, I will intentionally try to fill myself up with random stuff that would keep me busy, would tame the anxiety, and I thought would be meaningful to my career and my life, which they temporarily would, and I would get a bout of motivation, and you get where I'm going? It's a really depressing description, and I do apologize if it sounds like I'm dramatizing my feelings. This is still something that I'm working on myself, just putting my feelings into words, into something that I can actively face and tackle. But my therapist heard all that, and he said, if you think about it, if you don't get out of bed, if you don't leave the bed, if you don't do this thing called life, you wouldn't need to face the distasteful event of trying to finish this horrible, challenging, overwhelming thing that is your PhD. When you're dragging yourself to do those things, or when you're willingly doing the things you do, you're not doing it because you want to, but because you're trying to pacify yourself and subconsciously validate to yourself that you're good enough, that you're doing all of this for your own benefit, which may or may not be objectively true. So the feeling of motivation I get when I'm filling myself to the brim with things I thought would be good for me, which is not the healthiest thing to do, is actually validation to myself that, see, I am good enough. I am doing all of this. That is not the reason to do anything, including grad school. Oh no. Everything just sort of makes sense now. I think this still goes back to the issue of boundary and control. By taking the action to fill my schedule up, I am doing so that I feel control of my life, my future outcome, and my success. But I am using my desire for validation, which is an external factor outside of my control, as my source. I couldn't distinguish my internal locus of control, so I am not the primary driver of my actions, but more so the subject to the external validation, which I have no control of. Again, I was reacting and not responding of my own volition with actions. That makes everything harder for myself. So, what am I gonna do about this? Let's start with my 2 very general action items to kickstart my journey of tackling these issues and dealing with this next wave of work. Withdrawing from things that you overcommitted is not as easy as a lot of the productivity gurus make it. It's not just,
oh, just say no to the things you don't want.
A lot of the times we don't get that privilege, or in my case, because I'm kind of stupid, I just don't want to. These things that I've committed myself to, they fell into my laps at the perfect timing. Although them together could be a little bit overwhelming, I've never felt more aligned with what I want, and I'm happy that I get the chance and that I get the privilege to do all of those things. And I believe that this wave of work, counterintuitively, can actually show me where my field begins and ends. So now, as I face this bout of work head on, my first action item is a boundary that I want to set. While I am fully capitalizing the fact that I'm a PhD student, it is a temporary identity, and I am now officially refusing to incorporate that into every single thing that I do, including this channel. I intend for this corner to be a place for self-reflection and for immortalization of memories against the eventual takeover of time and experience. It's a sandbox of moments that I hope will help even just one person feel less alone in their journey. That is independent of my tag of a PhD student. To be completely honest with myself and the exploration of my flaws and human nature, I have to speak without identity. Locking myself in with identities and tags will most likely block me from seeing what's true, because those tags and identities, if taken in their entirety, would very likely pre-decide a lot of things for myself that I don't get to explore on my own. Nice. I would much rather keep evolving new identities for myself, i.e. Lishu in development, because this is something I picked up from Naval Ravikant. Facebook redesigns, Twitter redesigns, personalities, careers, and teams also need redesigns. There are no permanent solutions in a dynamic system. And we are dynamic systems. So from now on, I will be reframing all the obstacles that I run into at work as a means to redesign myself, to mold myself in the face of hardship, if you will, to fine-tune myself as a dynamic system under stress. Reframing can sound like a very hard to contextualize concept, but once you find your footing of reasoning, it can be incredibly easy to do and incredibly powerful. If you think about the principle of momentum in science, for some reactions, you need an initial amount of energy to get the reaction started. This, as you may know, is the activation energy. This activation energy is almost always higher than the amount of energy required to keep the reaction going. Once you start, you're less likely to stop. It's an easy concept, but I sure didn't know as a given. The same principle can be applied here in my second action item. I am tackling motivation and validation head on. I'm going to try to give myself a why that is not so creepily closely tied to that feeling of unworthiness. So basically, I'm trying to shift my motivation away from validation. If I can find a good reason though, I would just do it to harness the momentum and try to encourage myself with the smaller wins along the way, getting that dopamine flowing through. You might be thinking that I'm being really nitpicking with the motivation versus validation and that it's not that big of a deal. To that I say, yes, I am being nitpicking. And yes, it is not that big of a deal. But this is a solution that I identified that I'm willing to try with my current situation. I'm trying this to help me get through this upcoming rough patch. And I encourage you to do the same, to evaluate your situation regularly and come up with maintenance solutions, if you will, to make sure that you stay a well-oiled machine. Oh, I need another water break. I've been talking for way too much. But now, I feel much more content and confident about tackling this new wave of work. Hopefully this is the last time that I will inadvertently put too much on my plate. I think the future me will appreciate this honesty, and I hope you will too. Yeah, I hope you have a great day.